Jan Pfeiffer has accomplished and experienced many things in his life. Even before he became an awarded soldier in the Vietnam War, he had many talents, one of which was athleticism. He played both lacrosse and soccer at Kenwood High School and football recreation. Not only was Jan on the championship soccer team in 1963 when Kenwood beat Catonsville, but he also reigned as a victor on the mats. During his senior year, he wrestled in the 175-pound weight class, which was very competitive at the high school level. One of Jan's most triumphant high school moments was when he wrestled the top-seeded man in the weight class, whom he had tied earlier during the season. This was also for a championship title. He managed to reverse his opponent at the beginning of the hard-fought match, and in the second time period, he got a near fall, almost pinning him. Toward the end of the match, though, his opponent had been ahead temporarily at 6-2. This was no walk in the park. Despite this, Jan fought through, came back, and ended up winning 9-6. His outstanding victory was featured in the Baltimore Sun, and the tournament was even broadcasted on TV. His father had to take off from working second shift to watch, as he had never seen him wrestle because of work. Throughout all of the matches, this was certainly the one to see. He received his award standing in the middle, top level of the podium. Wrestling history at Kenwood High School had been made, and Jan was ready to start wrestling at the University of Maryland. However, this path was changed before he could embark upon it.
Jan was drafted into the Army in September of 1965, along with a lot of his friends from all areas of Maryland, including his cousin Mike. There were hundreds of draftees at Fort Holabird because of the start of President Johnson's buildup in Vietnam. After basic training and during advanced individual training, Jan was approached by representatives of the Special Forces, the Green Berets. They wanted him to enter their elite group of soldiers. Tests showed that he had the right skills and attitude that they were looking for, and they sent him to jump school for parachute training to become airborne. Even though Jan's main military specialty was in communications, he also took survival and hand-to-hand combat training. While in the Special Forces, Jan had to make several jumps to stay parachute qualified. Jan and his group often had to wait for the C-130 aircraft to take him up. He jumped about a half dozen times while going through Special Forces training. Jan wore a winter, dark green uniform with spit-shine jump chutes that signified his involvement with the Green Berets. As his training progressed, Jan was requested to extend 3 more years, as he had only been drafted for 2. This didn't sit well with Jan, so he actually decided to turn down further training with the Green Berets. Nonetheless, officials assigned him to the 25th Infantry Division upon arrival to Vietnam. They weren't airborne, and Jan was unhappy about that, as he had hopes to go to the 101st Airborne Screaming Eagles. But in the short time Jan was with the 25th, he was sent to the Cu Chi district. Jan and his peers worked out of bunkers when within the artillery parapets. They also slept inside one of their bunkers, often when they were waiting for firing missions. It was pretty small on the inside. It was definitely not like the bedroom he had back at home. During their firing missions, they had multiple assignments, one of which was loading the charges into a Howitzer 105 shell. They would put the charges in once the shells came apart, and would set the point detonator to the proper setting. Each task was key to the success of their mission.
Moonsun season was an aspect of Vietnam that was strikingly new. Time seemed to drag on forever, rain pouring down every day. The soldiers often entertained themselves during these long stretches of time by playing touch football. Jan was promoted to the rank of E4 Corporal and joined the Pathfinders, a small exclusive group of 8 to 10 airborne troops whose mission was to work as the ground contact between the infantry troops and the helicopter pilots. As a non-commissioned officer, Jan also acted as sergeant of the guard during the night, making sure all the bunkers were manned and alert. Once in a while, he would also have to straighten out rowdy drunken soldiers. During his off time, Jan and the other soldiers would read the Armed Forces newspaper and listen to 1966 hit tunes such as Good Morning America on the Armed Forces radio. But Jan and the other soldiers would eventually have to get back on duty, drive through villages, fly at treetop level in helicopters on their missions, and meet up with fellow soldiers. Jan took great pride in his role as a pathfinder. As ground contact with the helicopters, pathfinders brought in combat troops for assaults and assisted in the general relocation of troops from one location to another. For each mission, there were generally 8 to 10 helicopters that pathfinders worked with. Usually, 2 pathfinders would be present as soldiers boarded the helicopters, and 2 would be present as the soldiers were dropped off. The pathfinders were the first on the ground before the helicopters got there, and the last to leave when the troops were picked up. Because of the role they played, pathfinders were always in contact with the lead helicopter during any operation. In general, Jan recalled the conditions of Vietnam as being hot, humid, and generally miserable. More often than not, Jan had a lot to think about on the way back to the base after a mission, but the one thought that kept running through his head was, "I wish I was home."
At the end of his last mission, he waited for the helicopter to pick him up to take him back to the base, ending his tour of duty in Vietnam. Shortly after this operation, Jan was flown back to the U.S., landing in San Francisco with his final destination at Oakland Army Base. Within 24 hours after landing at San Francisco International, Jan was out of the Army. Soon after, he was awarded the prestigious Bronze Star Medal with a V device indicating his valor in combat zones by the General for his service in Vietnam. The Bronze Star was awarded in particular for his service as a radio telephone operator as a pathfinder on a mission north of Dak Hoa that became pinned down with hostile fire. He exhibited great bravery as he helped the troops board the helicopters under heavy enemy opposition with complete disregard for his own safety, directing armed helicopter strikes and boarding the last helicopter only after all other troops had been evacuated. As a reward for these courageous acts, his parents were sent a letter from Clarence Long, a congressional representative from Maryland, to congratulate him on his Bronze Star Medal. In addition to this prestigious medal, he also received the Air Medal for his achievements in aerial combat. This 22-year-old Vietnam War veteran had achieved a lot, but he could not stay forever, and he was happy to return home to spend time in the countryside, passing through New Mexico, unbound by military duties and obligations. In his spare time, he even liked to shoot rattlesnakes in New Mexico, as shown in this picture circa spring 1968. Eventually, Jan left New Mexico, and while passing through Arizona to visit his relatives, he met his future bride, who he has been married to for 48 years and counting.
Once Jan settled down from traveling, he started building a trike out of the back section of a Volkswagen Bug and a Harley-Davidson motorcycle frame by himself in his garage. This is the completed trike, which was all welded, fabricated, designed, and painted by Jan himself. It was a unique creation and people would always ask him about it. He loved to drive it around the neighborhood and would take his wife for rides. His wife also drove it on occasion to take their 3-year-old son around the block and down the street for fun. This picture shows Jan in his early 40s. He still continued on with sports, playing in softball leagues for the company where he worked at, and continued to lift weights, which he had started when he was 13. This is Jan's favorite project, a 1986 944 Porsche Turbo that he decided to transform into a show car. He replaced the 4-cylinder Porsche engine with a 1970 bored-out 350 Chevy motor. This is a picture of him installing the pistons into the block. His wife loves his long hair, by the way. After a lot of studying, Jan was able to do the final assembly of the bottom end, which is torquing the crankshaft cap nuts, as shown in the picture. He also even made the motor stand that the engine is on. In this picture, he is installing push rods in the custom aluminum heads. With the installation of that, the engine would be just about ready to drop into the Porsche. He was hoping everything would finish smoothly and the engine would fit perfectly in. This image shows all the hard work that Jan put into the engine. This image shows the final engine without the valve covers before the rocker arms were adjusted. All the polished aluminum brackets were hand fabricated by Jan. He also made his own motor mounts and adapters to make this motor fit into the engine bay. It is definitely as complicated as it sounds. He hand fabricated several other parts, such as this power steering reservoir made from an AC accumulator as shown in the picture. This is the 944 Porsche with the custom Mustang bullet wheels that Jan adapted to it. In 2016, Jan fabricated a new, sleeker, smoother hood scoop out of a 22 gauge sheet metal that is welded and hand-shaped. This is a Porsche sporting a new hood scoop. This car gets a lot of attention at cruisins and car shows for how unique it is. It's a one-of-a-kind custom-made car all done by Jan. Many people ask if they can take pictures with it, and others want to know about the engine and so forth. This project is one that Jan is very proud of. He started it when he was in his early 60s and finished it by the time he was 70. When Jan first met his wife, their first date was going out on the desert in Arizona and shooting pistols that she and her sister had. Now, 48 years later, they still go out on the desert when in Arizona and shoot. We hope you enjoyed this video of the great life of Jan Pfeifer.